offensive line to where they need to be. Jed Drennings, sideline reporter, West Virginia football, joins us in Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. Jed, I saw a list today, and we've had ours. You probably have had yours. Everyone, top teams, post-transfer portal, whatever, and then ones that struggle the most. Does West Virginia have enough with what they have gotten back from what they have lost to at least tread water?
Well, the short answer is yes, but, I'd start with this. Don't you kind of pine for the days just a short few years ago where we spent the off season, it was consumed with conversations about realignment, playoff expansion. And now here we go. Our lives have been entirely taken over by this roster management conversation, right?
Yeah,
that's the new reality, and that's the soup in which we all now swim. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the pros and the cons and the gains and the losses, that's the nature of the beast. You're going to have, some major transformations each year. You're going to have a fundamentally new football team each year. Now, coaches have always said, hey, don't judge us on anything we did last year in the past because this is a new team. That's never been more true than now in this modern era. So just like most of the rest of the country, we lost some pieces through the portal. Most on some level, maybe somewhat anticipated, a couple maybe not, but we also gained several. And not just Smokey this year, but even in recent years, when you look along our offensive line, we got a transfer guard a couple of years ago, and Doug Nestor from Virginia Tech, who came back home to the Mountain State to play for the Mountaineers. And we have Jaquay Hubbard, who's a transfer tackle from UVA, who is competing and in contention for a starting right tackle spot. So even in recent years, going back to Will Greer and beyond, we've benefited from just transfers in general. But now that things are more in flux and more dynamic than ever, you really have to be on top of how you manage your roster, and that's where Neal Brown comes in. He has tremendous attention to detail, and I think that he's found a puncher's way to kind of stay competitive and put us in position to really come out swinging and see what we can do and see if we can be competitive in November and go from there.
Jed, I only ask this question because a lot of the West Virginia fans that watch our show comment on Neal Brown all the time, but it feels to me that there's a tepid response at best to him so far, but that might not be considering all the factors that he's had to deal with in his very short tenure at West Virginia. How do you feel the fans are responding to Neal Brown, and what does he need to do to make sure that temperature raises a little bit?
Well, Coach Brown will be the first to tell you that, we've got to win some big games, and that's what will captivate fans. And he loves the fact that, he coaches for a program that's attached to a fan base that really, really cares, okay? And attached to that care from the fan side are expectations, okay? And he realizes, look, I have to deliver on those expectations. They're not going to wait forever. Irrespective of what kind of rebuild I might have been looking at. Because what happened was when Neal was hired in 2019, he recognized and embraced the traditional challenges that West Virginia faces that we've, at our best, been able to overcome. I mean, we're a developmental program. We get kids with chips on their shoulders that think that the guy that signed down the street that was a 4-star or a 5-star that they whipped in high school, they're better than him when they were rated a 2 or 3-star. And we get those kids into our program with that axe to grind and develop those kids and churn out a lot of NFL talent and find a way to be competitive against these blue blood programs. Traditionally, at our best, that's what we've done. Now, Neal recognized in taking the job, there were challenges in trying to get to that, and he signed up for those challenges. New challenges, just like here and everywhere else, and I would say not just in the non-blue blood programs, but even at some level in the blue blood programs, new challenges have presented themselves with NIL, with the portal. So you've had to address them on the fly and pivot and adjust on the move, and I think he's trying to do that. So now let's look and see if, in fact, we have an upper-level elite quarterback in JT Daniels, which it appears that that's what he can be. At his best, he's that kind of guy. He's a difference-making quarterback. And that's not, to disrespect Jared Dagey, who gave us a lot of quality snaps and a lot of quality production, and he was a mainstay for us offensively. I'm just not so sure that he's a difference maker. If you surround him with the appropriate supporting cast, he's going to win some football games for you, and he did. And he made some plays for us. But JT Daniels, maybe he is that difference maker. And this is probably the first time, if in fact that's the case, that we'll be judging Neal with that difference-making quarterback behind center. And that's when you truly find out what a coach might be all about.
Sticking with JT Daniels, the difference maker, how much does he change just the feel, the energy, and the perception versus had they been at the same point in the offseason and JT Daniels was not a part of the plans next year? Like, how much does he spruce up the expectations? Because it seems like that gave the program a real jolt.
Yeah, it did. And from a timing standpoint, you could argue that, well, we wish he was here in the spring to rep with the ones and maybe get in sync with things. But, maybe you can look at it the other way. If you want to look at it as a glass half full situation, we have three talented young quarterbacks who are vying for reps, vying for snaps, and trying to work their way up the pecking order. And they were kind of left to their own devices to split those snaps without JT around. And those were all quality snaps. So the fact that JT committed when he did, to your point, really energized the fan base. I think energized the program at large. There was a positive vibe immediately surrounding things. Even on the recruiting front, we've made some inroads. There's been a lot of positive progress there. Of course, it's ongoing in the portal, but I mean the 23 class looking into next year from the high school standpoint. So, yeah, it changed the perspective, and it was a big deal. I mean, it's not often that you have an opportunity to lure in, a five-star former recruit, right? A kid that was the only player in history to be named Gatorade National Player of the Year as a junior. So how can you not be excited about that, to invite that kind of guy into your program, not just maybe make your room that much better, but maybe even take it to a whole new level?
How much do you almost count Graham Harrell as a transfer?
Well, it's a good way of putting that, Smokey. First of all, on some level, you'd have to think he's tethered to JT Daniels, right? I mean, the relationship that they had was pre-existing from their days at USC, and he spent that entire off season with Graham Harrell, coming out of high school into that freshman season. And so they did have time together, into his sophomore season, that season opener, JT Daniels' sophomore season. That whole off season was with Graham Harrell learning this system. But the addition of Graham Harrell in the off season, that might be the spark plug that offensively we needed. A lot of the pieces, it appeared at times, were in place. And at our best, we were productive, but things just didn't click. I mean, we lacked the big play capability to help us get off the field quickly enough. So we were kind of put in position that we had to string long drives together. That's obviously, as you guys know, the long way around. Mm-hmm. That's a tough road to hoe. If you can bail yourself out with some 50, 60-yarders, get off the field quickly, well, you're not out there long enough to make the mistakes that you might otherwise make. All of a sudden, these false starts don't start stacking up and lead to 3rd and 12s and 3rd and 13s and forcing a bad situation. So that's what Graham Harrell is. He brings that, again, traditional air raid in the sense that he's going to push the football downfield. I'm intrigued with Graham of the fact that he meshes well those traditional air raid concepts. And again, remember, Neal Brown's an air raid guy too. I mean, you're talking about two former players under Mike Leach. But he also meshes some NFL concepts. He spent some time in the NFL. He spent some time in Canada. So he's a well-rounded guy, comes from a family of coaches, brings a tremendous perspective, and really has coached the room well. He has a track record of getting the best out of the guys in the room, whether that's Mason Fine as a true freshman at North Texas, or whether that was the series of true freshmen that he encountered at USC. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do with what we believe is a talented room at West Virginia, and take advantage of some of the weapons, some of the big-bodied guys that we got on the perimeter. We think we have some weapons in place, irrespective of some of the attrition that we've suffered in that room. I mean, we lost a slot, we lost a wideout, but we're pretty comfortable. I think the staff's pretty comfortable with what we have from a potential production standpoint in that room. Plus, there's a couple other JC kids. They're going to be on campus in the summer that are going to be an instrumental part of that kind of plug-and-play type kid. So we're excited about the potential that room brings, especially when it coincides with the new look of Graham Harrell's playbook.
Where do you think that they are still deficient?
Well, depth's going to be an issue at a great many areas. It really is. I mean, if you ask me, okay, what positions would they still be targeting now and through the summer in the portal? Well, obviously corner, and I would even say offensive tackle from a depth standpoint. And isn't it strange that that's probably always going to be the case? I say it's strange in that those are, if you ask me, if you're building a program, those are two of the first three positions you need, right? You need a quarterback, you need an offensive tackle to protect the quarterback, and you need a corner, okay, and maybe edge rusher as well. I'd throw in there as well. But those are the types of things that in a modern era, I mean, when you have a Rose Bowl played with Utah starting a running back at corner against Ohio State, that's just the new reality. These rooms are going to lack depth. It's not going to be ideal. It's going to be insufficient at times. And you're never going to be done and feel comfortable that you are as deep as you need to be across the board. You're really not. So we would still be on the hunt for another corner, even though I think from the top down, we have talented kids. When you look at our back end, we did lose some experience. We have some longer kids there, but we lack the experience. We're excited about their explosiveness, their playmaking ability. I think defensively, we might be in position to try some things that we haven't in recent years tried. Maybe man up a little more and bring some more bodies from a pressure package standpoint. I mean, what some teams started to do last year against us, guys, I mean, you saw Baylor do a tremendous job of this with Jeff Grimes and the plan that he put together. They started to max protect against us, okay, and simplify their routes and really try and place stress on our secondary with the extra time to allow those routes to develop. And we didn't have much of an answer for it because we were more of a zone defense. So it was difficult for us to manufacture that extra pressure. So with these body types that we now have populating that back end, even though they're young, there is the chance that they'll put us in position to be a little more creative when teams try and do that and have an answer. Play some man, bring some extra pressure packages, and maybe try and resolve that. So we'll see where it goes, but you're still going to try and address certain needs no matter what you have on the active roster on any given day.
Jed, I know it's been a little while now, but were you surprised at all when Dante Stills announced that he was going to be coming back, and what a coup that is?
Yes and no. And I look at it in the sense that you would have thought that coming out, his brother would have been more coveted and more successful than what he has been at the next level. Mm-hmm. Okay. When you look at the awards that he won on the conference level in the Big 12, Darius, but that hasn't taken shape. So I think from that, Dante looked at his brother's experience, who went undrafted, and said, you know what, I need to make the absolute most of every opportunity I have on tape. And that factored into his decision, coming back for one more year to really dot the I's, really cross the T's, really appreciate and understand exactly what it is that those scouts covet, that those scouts look for, that those scouts want you to show on tape. So that factored in. But also, I think there's some unfinished business when you talk to Dante. He's a Fairmont, West Virginia kid. He grew up. He's a legacy kid. His dad was a tremendous pass rusher for us back in the 90s, Gary Stills. But he grew up around the program, 20 minutes south. He's always been a Mountaineer fan. There's some unfinished business there. So I think when you put all these things together, it presented an opportunity for him to come back and make a difference and see what we can do in 2022.
Jed, with the news that we knew Brigham Young's coming in next year, we know that's happening.
Yeah.
But now there appears to be, and Mack Rhodes even told us on Tuesday, and there was reports last week that perhaps Cincinnati, Houston, and also UCF come in summer 2024. What's the reaction been in Morgantown that it's going to be next year? All four will join, whatever, Texas and Oklahoma as well. What's been the reaction, or has there been much?
I think there's some curiosity in the sense that, and it's strange that now it seems that in the news is the Power 5 leagues seem to have conversations flowing that they're steering away from divisional play, right? Where, of course, the Big 12 doesn't have divisions. They're talking more about going toward a model like the Big 12's had and have 1 versus 2 in their leagues at the end of the year, because there's been a curiosity among West Virginia fans if the Big 12 would one day steer toward divisional play and maybe give us some travel partners, and maybe that's what Cincinnati could serve as. And we were traditionally accustomed to traveling to Florida to play football. We had Miami in the Big East. We had South Florida in the latter Big East. So that's not foreign to West Virginia and West Virginia fans to add UCF and make that trip. So I think that curiosity as much as anything. I mean, first of all, it's 4 very good football programs and very solid additions. And they all bring different things to the table. So there's a lot to get excited about. And that's not salesmanship to say that. That's not lip service. When you look at the accomplishments of those 4 programs, first of all, who knows where any of this is landing? Who knows where any of this is heading? You now have Amazon with Thursday Night Football contracts with Pro Football. You're talking about Apple getting into the game. TV doesn't rule the roost in the way that it once did. So maybe being nimble enough to not be tethered and tied and attached to a TV deal like the ACC has puts us in better position long term with these new additions to entertain some of these digital possibilities. I mean, who knows? I mean, right? The landscape is changing under our feet almost on a daily basis. So I think in general, Mountaineer fans are excited about those types of brands. We're just excited to still have a seat at the table and be asked to play at the adult table. Because, again, when you look back to when the Big East eroded, when the Big East imploded, I should say, and fell apart, I mean, it would have been very easy to be UConn and be left behind, right? And be left scrambling. But that wasn't the case. I mean, we found a way to find a life preserver, land to the Big 12, still have a seat at that table. And moving forward, there's no reason to believe that won't continue. I think that takes precedent over anything else.
You know what's amazing is on the day that the Texas and Oklahoma and SEC story popped in late July, I didn't think about just the team that we cover, the core of what we cover with Baylor. I thought about West Virginia, Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, TCU, Oklahoma State, all of them. Because all of them kind of needed to, one, maybe it's good for them to break away despite the money. We know that that's going to hurt. But it seemed like every one of them had to look around the room and go, okay, who else is staying here? And it looks like everyone is, hey, we got to stick together. And it looks like that's happened. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think there's some level of solidarity, and perspective matters with these types of things. And I looked at it from a curiosity standpoint. When you looked at the Iowa States or the KUs or even Kansas State, Manhattan, things when you get further west. One thing we as West Virginians have learned as being part of the Big 12, you guys reckon distance much differently than we do. We're a mid-Atlantic East Coast type of brand, right? And everybody's on top of each other. It's strange to say in the mountains of West Virginia, but the East Coast in general is pretty concentrated from a population density standpoint, and we're a lot closer to a lot of other schools and programs than when you get out west. You're very spread out. So just that in itself lends to different possibilities, just geographically. And I'm not so sure that's the case with some of the schools that might have found themselves in the crosshairs if things ended differently, that are stuck kind of out in isolation like that geographically. So, and that's not even to say geography obviously rules the day anymore. It certainly doesn't. But that's one of the things that did cross my mind. But the solidarity that you're talking about, I think that's what's carried the day. The fact that we all kind of did band together and decide. But, back to the topic at large, when you're talking about what we've lost, what we've gained, I mean, this is the discussion that every fan base in America is taking or having. And, guys, I think back, I remember I heard Bill Belichick, either he said it or I heard him said about him. This was years ago. But one of the things he was in the practice of doing, the head coach of the Patriots, of course, was leading up to the draft, he would host and entertain and interview draft prospects that he really didn't feel they would be drafting. Okay, he thought the likelihood of the Patriots organization drafting these guys wasn't very high. Okay, in addition to the guys they were going to draft, they also interviewed and spent time with the guys they didn't. And his thinking was, well, first of all, he gained some insight into the type of person they were, what made them tick. And the reason that mattered was once their rookie deal was up and they hit free agency, if they did, he already had a step ahead in terms of forging some relationship, right? And that obviously served him well over the course of time. Well, I can't help but think that that's the way college coaches have to now approach this. In the past, maybe you got more upset than you probably should have if you lost out on a high school senior in the next class. But you got to remember, he's one sour conversation away from landing in your lap, 1 year later, now more than ever, right? Yep. And you could argue maybe you're in better position because now he's kind of committed to you, and it's not as easy for him to transfer again. So it's kind of changed, maybe even some way, the way that some coaches approach the whole thing. It's just all these things contribute to an ever-changing landscape that's nowhere near done changing.
No, it's every day. It's now a 12-month-a-year sport. Jed, you do a great job covering West Virginia. Always love having you on the show. Thanks for hopping on with us today, and have a great weekend.
Hey, you guys too. I appreciate it, Smokey. We'll see y'all.
Jed Drennings, West Virginia sideline reporter with a bunch of good insight and knowledge on West Virginia. A lot of you in the chat room asking about various positions. I try to ask. We all did as much as we could, but That's a school that, man, they've been close, and then they've also just kind of been there, and they're teetering on try to get back, if they can, into the conversation.
Well, I mean, they've had a lot of change. Holgerson was there forever, and he had a good thing going.